How's everyone doing? It's Healthy Habits with Dr. T. We're back after a little bit of a hiatus here the past few months. And I wanted to come on and just provide a few updates of projects that we're working on here in my office. Me and I'll call him my communications manager, Andrew, and I are working on a few case studies. So over the next few weeks, we're going to be presenting some case studies on, we have two women that were struggling with various issues. And the first one, Tanya, she was struggling with irritable bowel syndrome for, I think she says, a better part of like 15 or 20 years, and went to all types of specialists. She had all types of testing done, and except for the right one, in my opinion. But anyway, so she came in, she took that leap of faith. She signed up for my program. We did the testing that we needed to do. We got her on the right diet. We figured out what was going on with her body and what's going on in her gut specifically. We applied the treatment protocol that we used to fix it, and she was much better on the other side. So we're going to go over that case study in detail next Wednesday at 7 p.m. if everything goes according to plan. I'd hope to do it tonight at 7 p.m., but got a little behind on the slides. So we'll have that next week at 7 p.m. So that'll be a case study on irritable bowel syndrome. Then a few weeks after that, we're going to work on a case study on a woman with chronic fatigue, anxiety, and she was also having some issues with her gut. And she said, I think, quote unquote, she hasn't felt well since the 80s. And by 80s, she means like early 80s, like 82 or 83, I think she meant specifically. And literally within like 6 to 8 weeks of just changing things up in her diet, making a few small tweaks, providing her body with the things that it needed based on the testing that we do, and she's already feeling a whole lot better. So I'm looking forward to presenting that case as well. Other than that, some other updates are, we're going to talk about these case studies. We're going to talk about some of the tests that I do in my functional medicine program and why we use those tests and how we use them to help people overcome these problems that they've had for decades, and how they're different than the tests that they're getting from their conventional docs. We're going to talk about that, but then we're also going to offer you the ability to have those tests done yourself. So we're still working out the details, ironing out some kinks there, but specifically the two tests that we do on all our new patients that I want to make available to the general public without having to join our full program is the GI map, which is the comprehensive stool test that tests digestive function, looks for bad bugs, tells us how much inflammation you have in your gut, along with a few other things that are important towards managing a case. But we're going to make that test available, and I'm going to offer up some time to go over that with you individually so that you know what's going on, and then you have an idea of where to go from there. And same thing with the blood chemistry test. I had that seminar a couple weeks ago. I got really excited about that. That really shows a lot of information. You're going to see a little snapshot of it here in a few moments as I answer some of these questions. But I want to make that possible to have done outside of our program as well. So again, it just allows people to not make a huge investment, make a small investment, see what's actually going on in their body. And then at that point, you can decide, all right, I'm going to fix these problems. I'm going to deal with them, or bury your head in the sand again, or I don't know, or do stuff on your own, figure it out, but whatever. But I want people to be able to have that option to have access to the testing. I want to kind of take that curtain down, or take that wall down, that barrier that healthcare often places between the patient and the information they need to make good decisions. It's like you have this hierarchy set up to where you have doctors. We sit in our offices, we hold the power in our pen to order these tests or not. So if your health is important to you, you want to be proactive about it. You don't want to wait till you have a disease happen or something wrong happen, or maybe you have stuff wrong already, but you're not getting answers from conventional testing. I want you to have the ability to kind of take a look into my world, functional medicine, and take a deeper dive and look into what's going on with your health. So lots of people joining. Welcome, everyone. If you have any questions, I'll answer those live right here on the spot. So feel free to post those right now as I'm answering some of these other questions. But first, I'd like to start off with some questions that we have. I forgot one. So genetics testing I have up there in the comment section or the description of the video. So we have the gut testing, the blood chemistry, and a third one, which I haven't mentioned hardly at all yet. I mentioned it like 8 months ago, but I didn't really promote it very well or explain it very well. We had a little webinar but it was a little premature. It was a startup company, had some kinks to work out, but genetics testing is super exciting. Andrew saw that and he read about it, showed him a few videos, and he is just super excited about that. And we think people will really like to do a deeper dive into how their body functions, including what their genetics is programmed to have their body do, so to speak. So we still have environmental factors. We still need to trigger those genetics. We still can influence those genetics, but it's nice to know where you have those genetic susceptibilities so that you can look for those way ahead of issues ever happening. So like my personal genetics, I have a variation that affects the way my blood vessels respond to inflammation. And I have heart disease in my family, so that kind of makes sense. But if my blood vessel walls are not responding well to inflammation, they become inflamed more easily, it's going to put my body at a higher risk for having problems in the future in the cardiovascular system. So it's going to be more likely to cause some inflammation of the cell walls and the blood vessel walls, which attracts plaquing and then could cause things like hardening of the arteries or stroke or heart disease or heart attacks, things of that nature. So I try to be healthy anyway, but knowing that I have that genetic susceptibility, now I can tweak things a little bit. I can take things like resveratrol. I can up the fish oils a little bit. I can make sure I'm not doing anything to compromise my blood vessels even further. Things like smoking cigarettes or drinking too much alcohol or eating lots of processed foods. So it's at the end of the day, it's a lot of stuff that I should be doing anyway, but knowing that that's a genetic susceptibility, it gives me that much more motivation to follow. So again, for those of you just joining, welcome. How you doing, Teddy? How you doing, Dave, Patrick, Elizabeth, Jess, Jennifer, Megan, Janice, Senki? I haven't recognized that name before, so maybe a new viewer there. But anyway, if you're watching live, go ahead and throw some questions in the comments, or if you're watching the replay and you have some questions, or maybe a question comes up based on one of my answers, go ahead and throw those in the comments. We'll collect them for the next Q&A. We're going to try to have Q&A probably every other week. So we'll do Q&A, case study, Q&A, case study, and I think that will really go a long way towards helping people understand what I do, help educating people on what they need to do health-wise with lifestyle and diet. The case studies are great because it shows people that might be in your situation now. Like you might be sitting there saying, I've had IBS for like 20 years and I went to all these doctors. I had all these tests done, nothing showed up. So yeah, I can identify with Tanya perhaps. And, she did this, she did that. She followed a diet and it actually worked for her and she's doing better now. That gives you a little bit more motivation and a little bit more inspiration to go ahead and take that next step and do what needs to do to fix the problem, knowing that it can be done. Because especially if you've had problems for a long time, you see commercials on TV for probiotics or taking fiber or following a certain diet. You get all amped up, you follow it, and then it doesn't work out, and it's kind of disheartening, and it becomes discouraging, and you don't want to do anything. So by showing these case studies, I hope to help show people that it can be done. So, all right, let's go into some of the questions here that we've compiled from the past few weeks that people have asked in the group or sent us privately. So first up is a couple questions from Kathleen. So thanks, Kathleen, for the questions. All right, so question is, does it help to take supplements before knowing for sure what's going on in your gut? Like, is it pointless if you have gut bugs because your body might not even be benefiting from the supplements? So she's referring to, we had a video where I talked about the GI map and testing for different gut bugs. And so the question is it take the supplements and try things or have the test done is basically the gist of the question that I'm getting. So my answer would be test. And I'll share a story of a woman named Sandy. She had gut problems. And back when I first met her, I wasn't doing the testing. I wasn't using it because it cost a couple $100. And I was afraid people wouldn't want to pay any money out of pocket because it wasn't covered by insurance, because it is an expanded and comprehensive panel. And that's something that insurance usually doesn't want to pay for. They want to be like laser focused, pay for one thing at a time. So to pay for this whole panel, so it's not something insurance is going to do. And so it's out of pocket. And I was afraid to even present it to her and say, okay, here's a couple $100 and it's a test for your gut and we're going to see what's going on. So I figured, all right, we'll just try some things. So at the time, probiotics was kind of all the rage, which it still is now to a certain extent. So probiotics, good gut bacteria. All right, let's try that and see how that works. Well, we gave her that and it made her bloated, made her that much worse. So, all right, fail number one. Number two was, all right, let's try digestive enzymes, because a part of her issue was that she was having some acid reflux when she would eat, burning after she would eat. So I figured, all right, she needs to digest her food better. So let's try digestive enzymes. And that actually made it worse as well. It made the burning a lot worse when she took the enzymes, gave her heartburn, and was horrible. So fail number two. And then a couple of years went by, and I kind of lost faith in what I was doing at that point, and I think she might have as well. But a few years went by. I dove deep into functional medicine. I learned more about the testing. I learned more about treatment protocols, and then I realized that the testing was pretty important. So thankfully, she came back around. She started asking me some questions. I said, hey, how about we try this testing, and let's find out for sure what the problem is. So we do the testing. We get the information back. She had a couple bad gut bugs. She had some signs of what we call leaky gut syndrome or problems with the intestinal barrier. There's different names for that in the literature. But and then we gave her a few supplements for that problem. And it was literally within weeks, she noticed a change in how she felt. She was able to tolerate more foods. Being able to tolerate more food, she was able to get better nutrition after not being able to eat basically for 5 years or maybe even 10 years at that point, losing a lot of weight. So we did the test, we found the right problem, and then we applied the right treatment, and then she was able to eat better, and then it's kind of snowballing from there and improving. And that's a case study that we're going to do. That might be a month or so away, but we're going to talk more about that case study. So thanks for the question. I would say testing is definitely ideal. Now, if you just developed something a week ago, or maybe you took antibiotics a couple of weeks ago for an ear infection, say, and now you have some upset stomach, and now you're done the antibiotic, sure, throw in a probiotic, maybe that'll help. But for people with complex chronic problems, there's nothing that replaces the test, because then you know for sure what's going on. And I talk about the cost of the test, but looking back on it now, she probably spent $300-400 in supplements that didn't work, just because we wanted to avoid spending $300 on the gut test. So it didn't make sense. And then she wasn't any better, and she suffered an additional 2 years. So yeah, even though the testing is an investment, it's an investment well spent and gives us a lot of good information. So makes sense, guys, right? If that makes sense to you guys, give me a thumbs up or a like or a yes. And but yeah, if you have a problem, when you want to know what's going on exactly instead of guessing. So I'm getting there myself with my patients is I don't want to guess anymore. I want to make sure I know what it is. So test, don't guess is kind of the mantra here. So Angela says, I just ordered a probiotic for doTERRA called PB Assist. I've heard of that. I think it's a good product. So if the bacterial load is the problem and you need the right balance of the good bacteria, then that may do some good for you and might provide some relief. The problem is if you have something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, so SIBO, which I believe the statistics show is like 3 out of 4 IBS patients actually have SIBO, they don't have IBS. So they have this overgrowth of bacteria, and in many cases it's an overgrowth of the good bacteria. So by taking more good bacteria, you may stimulate that problem become worse. So that would be my only concern with something like that. And same thing with fiber. People are taking fiber supplements, prebiotics to feed the good bacteria. But in a case where you have SIBO, and I had a patient like that this recently, she's only 22 years old. She's had issues for the better part of her life, as long as she can remember. And she tried to go through all the different supplements, and she tried to take fiber, and it made it worse. And that's because at the end of the day, she had SIBO. She had an overgrowth. She didn't have an undergrowth of those good gut flora. So yeah, Angela, not a bad thought. I hope it works out for you. But if not, then that's when I would say definitely invest in the testing. All right, so Kathleen has another question here. So the question is it beneficial to take an enzyme supplement when having gut issues? So an enzyme can be good. So what we're talking about here when we say enzymes is that we have these proteins that help break down or dissolve our foods and the byproducts of our foods. So our body is supposed to produce plenty of enzymes on its own. So we start off with digestive enzymes for sugars and carbohydrates in our mouth, and it's secreted from our saliva glands. And then when it gets to the stomach, we don't really have enzymes in our stomach, but it's a stomach acid that kind of acts as the enzyme, and it helps it break down and helps sanitize our foods and sterilize it. And then when it goes into the first part of the small intestine, which is the next step below the stomach, then our pancreas releases digestive enzymes. We have our gallbladder, which releases salt bile acids to help break down fats. So between the pancreas and the gallbladder releasing the bile solids, or the bile salts, bile acids, and the digestive enzymes, that helps digest our food and break it down more thoroughly into the form it's supposed to be broken down into, so that our body can absorb it properly. Some people lack those enzymes. It's either because they might have a sluggish gallbladder, or they have a sluggish or gunked up bile duct perhaps, or pancreatic duct, and they're just not getting the enzymes there, or they're in sympathetic overdrive. So we have, it's a whole conversation in itself, but we basically have our sympathetic, which is fight or flight, and we have parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. So if you are stuck in parasympathetic, the fight or flight mode, your body's not worried about digestion. So think you're that squirrel, you're walking across the lawn, you see a hawk, you're eating a peanut or an acorn. The squirrel doesn't care about digesting that acorn. The squirrel wants to get the heck out of there, because if it doesn't, it's not going to live to see another day. So who cares about digestion and nutrition at that point? So we're in fight or flight mode. Same thing with us. Our blood supply and our resources get diverted to our heart and cardiovascular system and to our muscles, so that we can run away or fight back. Less goes towards the digestive system. So we produce less stomach acid, we produce less digestive enzymes, and then our digestion doesn't work quite as well. So taking enzymes can be helpful in the short term if that's what your body needs. Again, we don't know unless we test. But a couple things with that. One is you might not need it. And two is if you're just taking that so that you can continue doing all the wrong things, staying stressed out, staying in sympathetic mode, and not taking care of what you need to take care of, then you're just putting a Band-Aid on it, and you're just kind of prolonging the inevitable. We see that a lot in medicine. So if you have heartburn, take a heartburn medication to suppress the acid secretion, which helps with the symptoms of burning. But then what's that doing for your digestive function? So one of the things the stomach does is produce the stomach acid to help break down and sanitize our foods. And if we're taking medications to counteract that, is that going to be good in the long run? And the answer is probably no. All right, so before we get to the next question, let's see. Angela says, is there a specific brand of probiotic? There's several brands out there. I don't know if I want to mention any specifically, because there are different brands for different situations or different formulas. I tend to like spore probiotics, so spore-based probiotics. You have regular probiotics where basically like there's the seeds to seed a lawn, and those probiotics are the bacteria in those capsules. Most experts today believe that those are killed off at the stomach, no matter what kind of capsules they're contained in. I mean, it can be enterically coated to survive the stomach acid, but a lot of experts say, no, it's probably not going to survive the digestive process. That's okay, because it can still do a lot of good, because those bits and pieces feed the beneficial flora that's already living in our system and strengthens those. So we still get a response, we still get a benefit. Either that, or it might stimulate our immune system and kind of ramp it up a little bit, so that if you have something else going on, that the immune system, while it's being stimulated because of these probiotics, it will attack any foreign invaders or bad bugs that are in there as well. The spore-based probiotics actually make it through the digestive process alive and grow new cultures in the colon. And they have studies to back that up. And they have studies that show that in someone with leaky gut, where you have stuff leaching into the bloodstream from bacteria, they can take these spore probiotics for a month and reduce that significantly, or eliminate that absorption of those bacterial byproducts. And we don't see any research with the regular probiotics on that. And is it true that medication for anxiety and such make holes in the intestines in order to be absorbed? That I haven't heard of. So I don't know if anxiety or anti-anxiety medications can cause leaky gut or cause damage to the gut or anything like that. So you stumped me, Angela. I'll pass on that one. If I see anything, I'll let you know. All right, next up here, we have a question from Danielle. And the question is, do gut issues have a relationship with anxiety and balance issues? So I'll take the anxiety one first. And if you Google gut problems and anxiety, or gut problems and depression, gut problems, ADHD, gut problems, autism, you're probably going to find a lot of articles that are fairly new that relate the two or connect the two areas. We have something called the vagus nerve, which is a cranial nerve. So it goes from the brain, it goes down to all the essential vital organs, one being the digestive system, stomach, the intestines. And they think there's some communication there between what's going on in the gut and what's going on in the brain. We also have a connection there through the bloodstream. So different hormones are being released, different bacterial byproducts are produced. And what's interesting there is that we have clues, or we have a relationship where we see how the gut bacteria, our microbiome, our beneficial flora, communicates with the brain. And that helps coordinate a lot of things. The one they think it does is helps coordinate the immune system. So if you get exposed to something that's not good, you have some bugs move in there that are pathogenic that could cause an illness, your gut bugs are calling ahead for support before they get into the bloodstream. So it's interesting how that whole system works. But it's between those connections that we see there's some sort of relationship there between gut problems and psychiatric problems or brain-based issues. And that can go for depression, anxiety, ADHD, all that sort of stuff. And so that's very interesting area of research. And we can't say anything for sure at this point. But I think it's something that we're going to see more in the research in the future. Oh, as far as the balance issues are concerned, that's a little bit harder question to answer. I don't know of anything specifically between the gut and the balance or vestibular system that would make sense other than, well, I guess I do. I guess my answer to that, so do gut issues have a relation to balance issues? And I would say the connection could possibly be through neuroinflammation. So if you have inflammation in the gut, you have abnormal gut bugs, yes, bacterial byproducts are going to be given off. You may have an issue where you start to trigger inflammation in the brain area, and whether it's the cerebellum, which helps control some of our coordination and balance, or the vestibular system. When you have that neuroinflammation, it's going to affect the way those nerves fire and those nerve pathways fire. So there is a possible connection there. And I've seen issues. So one example of this is one of my first patients in functional medicine. She actually came from a couple hours away. My website's brand new. I throw it up there. And I get this email from this person a couple hours away wanting to see me for functional medicine because her daughter had seen someone in Jersey, I believe, and had really good results. So she wanted to see one as well. And I was the closest one to her. So she came down. She had tremors, and anxiety was one of her bigger issues. So it's not maybe balance exactly, but the tremors could be affecting her balance a little bit. But this just shows the connection between the gut and neuroinflammation in the brain. So the one thing we did was we changed her diet up, and she was eating healthy overall, but there were a few things that she was eating that can cause some inflammation, especially if she has leaky gut or something called leaky brain, or she was having some sort of immune reaction that was then triggering inflammation of the brain. So we changed the diet. We took those foods out of the diet. For her, one specifically was gluten and wheat. She's eating great, but she was eating a lot of whole grains because she thought whole grains were good because of the fiber. Within 6 weeks, her tremors, she reported, were down 80%. And the anxiety that she got was from having the tremors all the time and trying to sleep with her scalp twitching in her hands, the tremors in her hands. So all that was gone. Anxiety was basically gone. So yeah, there's definitely a connection there between the gut and then what's going on in the brain. So good question, Daniel. All right, next one here is Kelly has a question. So the question is, does anyone have recommendations for safe sunscreen for adults and babies or children? So this is a question from, I believe it was last night or the night before in the group. And so there's a lot of good answers there. So one thing you can do is most health food stores will sell brands that are free of most of the problem ingredients. But just in case, just to make sure, you want to be looking up whatever products you're using. And this goes for sunscreen. It goes for other health and beauty products, any lotion, anything that you're applying to your skin on a regular basis. And it could even be like makeup, shampoo, toothpaste. You want to go to EWG.org, so Environmental Working Group. And you could put in the name of the product. And if it's in their database, and it almost always is, it'll give it a grade. And if the grade's low, you can take a look at it to see why it was low. And because there's certain things in there that may be detrimental to your health or may cause reactions in people that are sensitive. So you want to take a look at that. And I don't have any names off the top of my head, and I'm not a sunscreen expert, But take a look at that, the Environmental Working Group. You might even be able to search by sunscreen, so by product type, and then they'll give their top recommendations. The other thing with sunscreen too is that I want to make a note of this and point it out, is that if, especially a baby, if you wouldn't normally have them out in that sunlight without any sunscreen on, you probably shouldn't have them in that direct sunlight, even with the sunscreen on. There's some questions on whether the sunscreens actually filter out all of the damaging rays. So even though it might be filtering out the rays that cause the burn, so the person's not burning their skin, some of the other rays and harmful parts of the rays are getting through, potentially leading to problems with skin cancer down the road. So I would be careful of that. So use clothes can be helpful as well. So sun shirts. I know when we take our daughter to the beach, we have some long sleeve shirts that's light and it breathes. So it's good for when it's really warm. It's good for the water, but it doesn't let the sun's lights penetrate. So that can be helpful. Hats, sunglasses, so cover up. Also, gradually increasing sun exposure. So we're coming out of winter right now, this time of year, and we're all kind of pale and white here in northeastern PA. So you don't want to go out and have like an hour worth of sun right off the bat. But if you have a few minutes here or there, kind of build that base tan so that the skin has a chance to kind of get used to it. It's almost like exercise. You don't want to go out and run a marathon your first day out. You want to gradually increase that exposure, and then it will tan, and then your body kind of has that adaptive mechanism built in where you won't burn quite as easily. And if you do burn easily, you can look at things like I've read where omega-3, so like things like fish oil, if you're really low in those, you're going to burn easily. And I'm sure there's probably some other nutrients in there that are involved as well. So that's something to take into consideration. So good question, Kelly. All right. Let's see. Next questions here. All right, this question is kind of the gluten question. We talked about that the other day. So we're asking about what's the deal with gluten and how are oats? What if I decide to make my own bread? What's the best flour to use? And any thoughts on the sprouted grain bread? And so these questions are coming in from multiple people. So first with gluten, and I'll make it as briefly as I can. So gluten is a protein found in wheat products and many grains. And the problem with gluten is that when we absorb it into our system, when we digest it and it starts to float around our bloodstream, the protein structure fragments from gluten are similar to certain things that float around their body. It's called cross-reactivity. So as those gluten molecules are floating around, or those proteins sequences are floating around, our immune system sees that as, oh, that's not supposed to be there, let's attack it. But because it's similar to some of our own body's protein structure, then we get friendly fire, especially if you're eating it on a regular basis, which think about the American diet. We wake up eating cereal, bagels, oatmeal, breads, toast. So it just seems like it's all flour all the time in the morning for breakfast. And then for snack, we have pretzels, we have crackers, we have cookies, cakes, all that stuff. For lunch, sandwiches, pizzas, stromboli, again, all wheat-based products. We get the dinner, same type of thing. We have pizza, pasta, noodles, macaroni and cheese, all that stuff. So again, it's all gluten-based foods. And same thing with our condiments. It's a lot of ketchup, soy sauce, a lot of different types of sauces that we use on our meals are gluten containing, and it's a thickener. So they use it in a lot of sauces and dressings and stuff like that. So really it's just so common in our society that it becomes a problem because we're just being always exposed to it. And especially if your body tends to react to it and you're consuming it all the time, you're going to have problems. So anyway, so with gluten, that's the issue. So now it's okay, what about oats? So oats is technically not gluten containing, but they're harvested in the same areas, they're stored in the same facilities, and for that reason you get a lot of cross contamination. And if you're sensitive to gluten, it doesn't take much to trigger a reaction. So that's the problem with oats. You can get gluten-free oats, but then some people would say, well, there's similarity between some of the proteins in oats. They may not be gluten, but they might be gluten-like, and because they're gluten-like, they also trigger the same reactions. We see the same thing in beans, for instance. So on a paleo diet or an anti-allergy diet or allergy elimination diet, we exclude beans. And that's for that same reason. They contain protein structures and other things that could get into the body and cause reactions. So that's why I would avoid those things. If you're making your own bread, it's better. So when we get whole grain breads, you're buying whole grain breads that are really probably 10% grains and the rest is just regular white flour. They just add a little bit of the whole grains, or they color it with caramel coloring to make it look like it's healthier. Now, if you get something like a 7-grain bread, well, yeah, so you're getting more fiber. You might be getting some more vitamins in that type of bread. But if gluten is your issue, it's not going to be any better for you. So someone that has celiacs, whether they eat 7-grain bread or white bread, it's all going to cause the same negative effects. So I wouldn't say that whole grains are necessarily better unless you know for sure that gluten is not a problem, which my opinion is that most people have issues with it. If you have it once in a blue moon, fine. And if you do have it, have 7-grain bread or have it the healthiest form possible. But still, I think for the most part, you shouldn't try to eat gluten on purpose and grains on purpose. And that takes me to the next one, which is the grain breads or the sprouted grains. So sprouting the grains, if it's actually sprouted grain bread or you do it yourself, you sprout it, that's probably going to be the lowest impact as far as the grain-based breads are concerned. So, yeah, I would say the sprouted grains are good. Not good, but if you are going to have it, go sprouted. That's going to be the best option, because when you sprout it, you break down the shell, the outer covering, and you remove a lot of they're called anti-nutrients like lectins. So it's a little bit better. But again, if you're gluten intolerant or celiacs and gluten causes problems, you're still going to have the same issues, whether it's sprouted or 7-grain or whole grain, or if it's just Wonder Bread. To me, it's all going to cause the same negative reactions. So I would say try to avoid it if at all possible. So, all right, guys, I hope you found this informative, and keep the questions coming. I have several more here that I have to get through, but I started a little late, and my dog gets done at doggy daycare at 6:30, 6:18. So I got to get out here in a minute or two before they lock him up for the night, and probably charge us a lot extra. So, all right, guys, any more questions? You guys are watching. Thanks for tuning in. If you have those questions, post them in the comments here, and Andrew and I will collect those. If you have any friends that need to hear this information, I just had a conversation with a patient, and she's getting pretty good results. And she has friends that are suffering. They're having these issues, but they just won't listen to her and follow some of her advice that she's following so that she can get better. One being, come see me so I can help them fix their issues. But if you have anyone that needs help, the best thing to do is just invite them to this group. A lot of you guys have been in this group for a long time now, and you get the benefit of hearing the information on a semi-regular basis. And for someone that's not familiar with this information, it's hard to just kind of get the point across all at one shot. Like if you see them at a gathering, or you're hanging out with them on a Friday night, it's like, go see my doc, or do follow this diet, and then to say why. Well, it's hard to in the moment try to explain everything that it's taking me months and months and months to explain here in the group. So the best thing you can do is invite them to the group, and I would send them the link so that they have to come and enter the link in and hit enter, so they show up on the page and then they answer the questions, because then we want to answer those questions, because that's how we build some of these frequently asked questions that we do in the group each week. So sending them the link will make them take ownership in it, make them do something. You can just add them, that's fine too. But a lot of people that just get added, they never act on it. They don't do anything. They don't answer the questions. They don't participate. So make them take that first step, and then they have a little bit more ownership in their own situation, what they're going to do. So, all right, guys, got to go get Todd the dog. We'll see you next week, next Wednesday, 7 p.m. If the stars align, everything works out correctly, we're going to do a case study. IBS, Tanya had issues since like 2004, several specialists, family docs, medications. I think she had like 4 colonoscopies, all that testing, still had the issue getting worse, but she was able to overcome that in like, I think it was like 4 months really, to where she was feeling mostly good, and then 6 months ultimately. But we're going to talk about her case. We're going to talk about the protocols I put her on, what testing we did. And so I think everyone's going to get a lot of information out of that, but especially if you've gut problems. If you have any gut problems at all, you won't want to miss next week at 7 p.m. on Wednesday. And then a couple weeks after that, we're going to talk about chronic fatigue. We have a case study on that. And then in between these case studies, we're going to do more of this Q&A. So submit your questions. I want to answer what you guys want to know about, what questions you guys have. And all right, see you guys later. Thanks.